Good afternoon. Welcome to the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee Subcommittee on Health and Human Services. Today is February 10th. We have 4 budgets that we will review today. We'll go in the following order: the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, the Property Tax Assessment Boards, the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, and we'll conclude with DHS Office of Home Energy Programs. So with that, colleagues, we'll start with the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We have our analyst, Grace Pedersen, back with us. So good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you. It's my pleasure to present the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing's fiscal 2023 budget analysis. Starting with the first exhibit, you can see the budget stays pretty much level from the fiscal 2022 working appropriation. Most of the budget is for personnel, followed by sign language interpreting services and cost allocations. The change in the budget is mostly driven by personnel expenditures for both regular positions and a part-time graduate assistant position. The number of positions and contractual full-time equivalents remains level from the working appropriation. Going to the issues, the first issue is about sign language interpreter complaint reporting. So deaf and hard of hearing constituents can file an official complaint with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, but the number of complaints filed in any year are relatively low, never exceeding 14 complaints over this 7-year period in a single year. So, but in the past, the office has indicated that it has received thousands of complaints, and most of them have had to do with interpreters. So last year, the committees requested the office submit data about the number of informal complaints that it receives and the nature of those complaints, where they occurred, like by industry, whether in educational or medical settings. And in response to that request in the Joint Chairman's report, the office established a complaint reporting form on its website, and it plans to submit that data after the conclusion of the current fiscal year. In addition, in prior years, the office submitted a response to the Joint Chairman's report identifying policy options that could be used to protect users of sign language interpreting services in the state. And those options ranged from establishing a full licensing board to using regulations to protect users of sign language interpreting services. At this time, the office hasn't introduced any legislation to effectuate any of these policies, and bills proposing to implement any of these policies have not passed yet. So the status of the situation remains relatively the same from last year. Going to the next issue, the participation in services for deaf and hard of hearing individuals has decreased for some programs. There were fewer children served through the Hearing Aid Loan Bank in fiscal 21, as well as eligibility determinations for the Telecommunications Access to Maryland program and the Division of Rehabilitative Services also decreased substantially from the prior year. So that concludes the issues. DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Pedersen? Okay, I see no questions from the members, so we will now hear from Mr. Kelby Brick, who's the director of the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Good afternoon. Good to see you again.
Is my interpreter here? Mr. Brick needs to be spotlighted.
Yep, I have.
Yeah, he is. I don't see the interpreter also, though.
I'm the interpreter.
Okay, I don't.
Madam Chair,
Do we need both on screen? Is that possible?
we do not need me on the spotlight. You just need
Okay.
Director Brick on spotlight.
Okay, great. You can go ahead and proceed.
I need to be spotlighted. I don't believe
Oh,
I'm
okay.
spotlighted.
I was told you didn't need to be. I'll spotlight you right now.
Director Brick speaking. He's not spotlighted.
He is on my screen spotlighted. He's the only person I see on my screen.
Yeah, I've got him spotlighted.
We need to
Uh,
spotlight myself and the interpreter, please.
Sure.
Sure, that's what I had, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone, Madam Chair, and members of the committee.
God, I'm infuriated.
I'm honored to be here once again on behalf of the Governor's Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing as the director. Now, I would like to thank the legislative analyst, Grace Pedersen, for her marvelous work in understanding our office. She has worked. I have sent in my written testimony to you all, and I would like to mention that I am very excited about the rollout of text to 911. That is very critical for the 1.2 million deaf and hard of hearing individuals who live in our state of Maryland. They're now able to access 911 through texting, and anyone else who needs to text to 911 for various reasons. I'm also very excited that the survey came out from the Health Signs Center, surveying various states as to how deaf and hard of hearing individuals in those states gain information and services regarding COVID-19. Now, this survey shows that the deaf and hard of hearing individuals in our state of Maryland were very satisfied. They were pleased with all of the amount of access that they were able to attain during the COVID pandemic. We gave access to make sure that all individuals in the state of Maryland were safer. And I want to thank the governor for his support of this. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer your questions. And thank you again for your support. And I ask that you please support the governor's proposed budget for the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Any questions from anyone?
Thank you. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? Okay, seeing none. I have no witnesses signed up to testify on this. Oh, sorry, Senator Young has a question. You can unmute, Senator Young.
Hello there, Senator Young.
Thank you. Could you very briefly tell me what the scope of your office is in relation to the deaf in terms of where else they fall under, the school, other places? What's the scope of what your office does? Can you hear me?
Certainly. Thank you, Senator Young, for your question. You're asking about the scope of our office. First, I would like to recognize and thank the Senator for your support of the deaf community in the Frederick area, including the Maryland School for the Deaf and the Maryland Community Center. You have been supportive of us in many areas. Our office has 12 duties that are outlined in law. One that is that we advise the governor, Governor Hogan, on the state programs and services to ensure that they provide appropriate access to deaf and hard of hearing individuals in our state of Maryland. We work with different departments and agencies to see how they access, how deaf and hard of hearing individuals are able to access their services, to make sure that there is equity of all programs and services that are available to the hearing individuals, that they are also available to the deaf and hard of hearing as well.
Okay. I've just had several comments from the deaf community lately that they feel kind of left out, that they're under a bunch of different places and they feel like they're kind of second class in most of the areas. I put a bill in this year, the last minute, on a request from them to try to get money for a deaf community center. They had an overwhelming crowd turnout in the temporary when they had, which they've lost already. But I was shocked when I saw statistics that basically said about a 6th to 7% of all the people in the state are either deaf or hard of hearing. It was listed as over 1 million. Is that fits what you know?
Yes.
Okay. How many of those people have contact or seek services? Or do most of them just kind of go on their own? I mean, that's a lot of people for an agency to be handling if they were all being active and looking for assistance.
Okay, so Senator Young, I do agree with you. The deaf and hard of hearing individuals, do they have full access and full opportunities as everyone else in the state of Maryland? No. Maryland has more opportunities that are not available like to people in other states. We have made a lot of progress, but obviously not fast enough. We're not there yet. We've made a lot of progress during the last 7 years, a lot of headway, but there's still a lot of work that's yet to be done. Yes, I saw you propose a bond for the Maryland Deaf Community Center, and I do appreciate that. And we're reviewing that ourselves in our office, and we're looking for other resources possible to bring in a deaf and hard of hearing community center. We just lost, the deaf in Frederick just lost their place because
Yes.
of the funding source. The funding source disappeared. So that's a big concern for us because we know that Maryland's community center was the only one that had a community center such as that. And we want to be able to continue to support that. And we're looking into that as well, Senator Young. Now, the community center for the deaf is there to fill in the gaps that are not there in the system. And that's why it's so critical to get one.
Well, we do have 2 potential locations if we get the money, but I know they're very anxious, and it would have been nice if we could have gotten the request sooner, but hopefully in a supplemental budget or under infrastructure, there might be an outside chance.
Yes, and we're in constant contact and communication with the board of the MDCC. They're letting us know that they're also meeting with you, and hopefully together, all of us will be able to figure out a solution to assist and obtain services for the deaf and hard of hearing in the various ways. Thank you so very much for being involved in this very important effort, Senator Young.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for that response. Are there any further questions from the subcommittee? Senator Eckert.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank Director Brick for being so engaged, particularly on the Mental Behavioral Health Advisory Committee and other committees I've participated in. He truly does represent his community well and is not shy about speaking up to make a point. So thank you very much, Director Brick.
Senator Eckert, I would like to thank you for your long support of Behavioral Health Advisory Committee. Our staff has been has acted as co-chair for many years for the cultural and linguistic committee in behavioral health. And it's critical work, it's important work, and we like to do a lot of other work regarding mental health access to the services. We're working to change Medicaid rules, which will then enable remote video therapy for mental health treatment for deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Before it was not permitted. We were now allowing, we've now worked to allow that to be reimbursed by Medicaid. And now currently with the COVID pandemic, we are seeing more and more mainstream programs accepting the ideas from our office for remote mental health therapy. So we're very excited about that. And thank you so much for your support in this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions from the subcommittee or compliments? All right, seeing none, thank you all very much. Thanks to the analyst and to Director Brick. That will conclude the hearing on the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Colleagues will now turn to the Property Tax Assessment Board budget analysis.
Senators, I'd like to one last time thank you for all that you've done for us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, colleagues, turn to the Property Tax Assessment Appeal Board. We have Morgan Smith with us, who is our analyst. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. It's my pleasure today to present the operating budget analysis for the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board. And this will be quick and easy. The fiscal 23 budget decreases by $4,000 in fiscal 23 to $1 million total. And you can see here by this first chart that they operate completely with general funds. This is a pie chart explaining the overview of agency spending. And you can see that 82% of all agency spending is to support both regular or all of their regular positions, which are 8. And the rest are broken up between rent, contractual services, and other operating expenses, with rent being the next biggest chunk at 7%. I'm going to briefly show you the proposed budget changes. So I do want to note that there was a net decrease in personnel, which is attributed to a decrease in regular earnings. They did have 2 positions that were filled and hired at a lower salary than their predecessors. So the amount of regular earnings went down. And this decrease in regular earnings was partially offset by other fringe benefit adjustments. In personnel, you'll see that it stayed stagnant from the fiscal 22 working appropriation to the fiscal 23 allowance, and they don't have any vacancies. And then just briefly, I have 2 additional exhibits to show you. So this exhibit 3 on page 5 talks about the agency caseload and backlog of assessment appeals. And you may already know that PTAB is the second layer of a 3-layer system, with SSTAT being first. They provide the assessments, and then if somebody wants to appeal, it goes to PTAB, and if they appeal the PTAB decision, it goes to the Maryland Tax Court. So what you're seeing here is the total number of appeals received by PTAB from SSTAT's decisions, the number that they cleared, and the number pending at the end of the year, also known as the backlog. And you'll see that they did trend downwards from 2016 to 2019 and had almost wiped that backlog out before 2020. In 2020, obviously the pandemic hit, and they had a very difficult time getting some of their boards back into the office. And that might have been, it's a couple different things. One of them is, for some of the smaller boards, because PTAB operates in each individual jurisdiction, they had to abide by each individual jurisdiction's COVID rules and regulations. And so some of the smaller agency or the smaller counties weren't allowing PTAB into the office to complete appeals. And then there was one county where the entire board was nervous about going in, and they had a little bit of trouble with that. So that it's all COVID related. And then this second exhibit, exhibit 4, this shows the number of decisions reversed by the tax court. And you'll see that the number of appeals that were filed with the tax court from PTAB's decisions and then reversed by the tax court. We're at an all-time low from the last 5 calendar years at 5%. So that's great news. They strive to be accurate and fair. And so the lower that percentage is, the better. And that is something good to talk about for PTAB. And then as far as recommended actions, we just occur with the governor's budget. And that concludes my presentation. I'm excited to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? Okay, I don't see any. So it looks like we are ready to move to the agency. We will hear from Julie Greencrist with the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chair and senators of the subcommittee. PTAB is favorable and concurs, but we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Oh, Senator Eckert.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Julie. Am I to understand, according to this chart, that you have some, I don't know, 7,000 cases that are backlog with appeals?
Yes, so currently we have approximately 8,389. 4,200 cases belong to Prince George's County alone. Prince George's County board members were not willing to go into the office. They were not willing to pick up papers. They were not willing to do anything as being apprehensive of the virus. In the meantime, we have gotten a brand new board in that county and are hoping to have them up and running on March 1st, full speed ahead.
Just out of curiosity, what's the age of those appeals? I mean, do you have some that go way back, or are these just current according to calendar year 2019 and 2020?
Yes, we do have some that go back. That is a combined of what we call pending current, which would be 2021, and pending prior, which would be 2020 and under. And in Prince George's County, 2,352 of them are prior 2020 and under.
Okay, so you work with the counties to try to get those resolved as quickly as possible?
We don't necessarily work with the county. We work with the county in getting members to be present, to actually hear the appeals and make decisions. So we have worked with the county on that. As the first set of members they just appointed, 3 of them had full-time jobs and were not capable of sitting. They thought that the job pertained meeting once a quarter, and that is not. We are a working agency, and they will be sitting daily trying to get through these appeals. So I have talked to the appeals liaison in Prince George's County, and she has put out another advertisement with a job description being fixed and changed, and she is working on that diligently, but we do have 4 ready to go.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I was just curious because occasionally, I mean, I'll have somebody come to me and say, this sounded outrageous, and we'll say, well, go back and take it to your board and explain that and see if you can get it worked out. So.
Oh, I agree. It's been very frustrating on our end. The administrative office of PTAB has been working diligently and hard in trying to acquire spaces for these people to meet, because every appellant, we gave them the choice of going to written or, for the first time in history, doing virtual hearings. So we did do that during COVID, trying to get through some of the backlog, and some did permit us to do written hearings, but the majority of the people want in-person hearings, and that is their right by the Maryland state law. So hence our backlog and trying to acquire space and trying to acquire members to be present to hear these.
Do you, one more question, then I'll quit, Chair.
Yeah.
Do you, do you foresee we're going to get a big influx with the rush on property and the increase in the
Inflation,
value?
yes.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do.
with all of that.
Definitely.
So I'm sure you're thinking about what you need to put in place to make sure.
Well, I can give you history as I've been here 22 years and another 7 years with SDAT. When we went into the recession years ago, PTAB was carrying 17,000 backlog cases. It
Oh,
took
boy.
us these 10 years to get down to where we were, and we were down to like 1,200 cases, and guess what? The pandemic hit.
That helps. Thank you very much, Julie. Appreciate
You're
that.
very welcome. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Young has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, is something unusual going on in Prince George's County? Why is it so high there?
Again, to reiterate, the board that was in Prince George's County, we did have some complications with them. If one was sitting, then the other didn't want to sit because they didn't like the other. They would not come into the office.
Let's stay away from the person.
Exactly. It was just,
stick to the fact.
it was in between personalities and the COVID. They
So
were.
Were you asking about the number of appeals for Prince George's County?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he was more not speaking to the backlog, but just speaking to the large
No.
number of requests for
I
consideration.
can't say anything particular is going on. We call the 5 metropolitan counties are the majority of our appeals within the entire state of Maryland, which would be Prince George's, Montgomery, Baltimore City, Anne Arundel, and Baltimore County. The 19 smaller counties do make up a lot of cases, but not the majority of cases.
You don't have a backlog in those other large counties like Prince George's County?
I have some, yes, I do. But one of my best boards has always been Baltimore City and getting through the appeals. Chief Herman Williams was the chair, and he did an excellent job for 18 years in that county. Montgomery County is a hard work. I mean, they've been in the office having hearings constantly. I would just say that we wouldn't be as far back if we had the board willing to meet at times.
So are you understaffed there compared to the other counties, or it's just personnel problem?
It was a
Not to go into the
personnel,
problems, but
yeah, it was a personnel problem, which has been remedied. The Prince George's County has submitted 6 brand new board names to the governor's office who made the appointments. So we had 6 brand new members come on board, but of those 6, 3 of them had full-time jobs and will have to withdraw. But the county is working diligently in getting 3 more members, but it only takes 2 to make a quorum.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Senator, and thank you. I do have questions, but rather than delay the committee, I'll meet with you offline and kind of talk through some of this.
Okay.
It sounds like there are some historical issues and some current issues related to the process. And quite honestly, I'm not familiar with the recruitment process or what kind of compensation these board members, if any, receive or any of those things. So I don't want to disparage any individual or any board. I would prefer to look,
Definitely.
Solutions to help address whatever issue
Definitely.
any and all the jurisdictions may be facing. So I see no further questions from the subcommittee. So that will conclude the hearing on the property tax assessment appeals boards. And we thank our analysts and we thank the administrator for your presentations this afternoon.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Colleagues, will now turn to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. We have Ms. Smith again, Morgan Smith, who will be our analyst for this presentation. So we'll turn it over to you again, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, can you see the screen? So this is a brief overview of SDAT's fiscal 23 budget. And you can see that in fiscal 23, their budget decreases by $7.5 million or 4.4% to $161.7 million. And you'll see that that is primarily made up of general and special funds. In this first exhibit, I just want to give a brief overview of the percent of personal property assessed timely by SDAT. So SDAT has a goal of assessing personal property by October 31st of each year. And personal property, it was described to me as things that were movable. So vehicles, phones, things like that. And you'll see that in Exhibit 1, from 2017 to 2021, there was a decrease over time of the percent of property that was assessed by October 31st. In 2017, they were at a high of 98%. And then by 2021, they had fallen to only 60% of their personal property returns were assessed by their goal of October 31st. So that's just something to keep in mind. The department did tell me that this is partially attributed to a filing date that was extended from April 15th to July 15th. So that is to partially blame for this decline in the assessments. Exhibit 2 shows the accuracy of real property assessments by SDAT, and this is related to market valuation. So it's measured on a ratio of assessed value to the sales price of the property. And from fiscal 2017 through fiscal 2021, SDAT maintained a ratio between 94 and 95% for all assessments. So that means that their assessments were accurately valued when they went out to assess versus when the property actually sold. And real property in this case, they're buildings and houses and things of that sort. Exhibit 3 talks about the enterprise zone tax credit participants and the capital investments into those zones. So one of SDAT's goals is to increase capital investment in new businesses located in these enterprise zones using primarily property tax incentives. And this exhibit provides information on the number of participants in those zones. And you'll see that the number of participants over time has decreased a little bit and then increased again in 2021, but the total capital investment line continued to increase. And that is primarily because the businesses that are located in those zones who are providing the capital investments into the communities continue to provide a higher amount of capital investment, even if there were a lower number of participants in these zones. SDAT's specific goal relating to this is to continue to increase the number of participants and continue to increase the capital investments. So you can see in 2021, they succeeded in that goal. And then just another graph. So this is customer service feedback. SDAT began providing all of their customers with the chance to provide satisfaction rating after every interaction with their office. And you'll see that from 2019 to 2021, it declined in the number of feedback forms received. And that was primarily due to COVID, that most of their physical offices where they would interact with a customer and then hand them a feedback card were closed. And so they didn't have that in-person face-to-face interaction, resulting in a lower number of feedback forms. And you'll see that the percent of respondents that were satisfied decreased from a high of 99% in 2020 to just 84% in 2021. I will note that their goal is 85% satisfaction. So at 84%, they are not too far off their own mark, but it is a decrease from what they had in 2020. And it has been expressed to me that they hope to get that percentage back up. I'm going to talk quickly about a proposed deficiency, which I'll talk about again later. But there were two proposed deficiencies for fiscal 22 in the fiscal 23 budget. and they relate to Chapter 717 of 2021. And effectively, this is payments being made to homeowners' property tax credits, then coming back into the local reserve accounts from the state. So the state is required to reimburse the local reserve account in the annual budget bill equal to 1/15 of the total refunds paid. And then there's another deficiency appropriation that provides the rest of the funding to the local reserve account. 14/15 goes in. So then, that makes them whole again. I'm going to briefly go through the overview of agency spending, and I've broken this up in 3 ways, so I'll walk through those. This first exhibit shows agency spending for 2023 allowance, and you'll see that 60% of their total budget is used for tax credit programs. And the next biggest chunk is personnel at 29%. Breaking this down one more time, you'll see that by function, the tax credit programs do maintain that high percentage of the allowance, but this pie chart shows a little bit better that assessments take up 25% of their total allowance. And then breaking it down one more time, you'll see in Exhibit 7, this is just that tax credit pie slice broken down by each individual tax credit program. So you'll see that the Homeowners Tax Credit Program accounts for 2/3 of the total budget, and the smallest tax credit program is renters, and that's only 5%. In the proposed budget, I'm just going to point out a couple things. So you'll see that there was a change in personnel expenses of $1.5 million due to a decrease in the budgeted turnover from 8.9% to 5%. I will also note in the tax credit program section, you'll see that the last 2 lines are related to that deficiency that I just talked about. And the next biggest change within this budget is $4.6 million for SDAT's major IT development project. And there's more information on that in the appendices. I'm going to talk briefly about their personnel. So you'll see that between the fiscal 22 working appropriation and the fiscal 23 allowance, SDAT did gain 2 contractual FTE positions. One of those is to help with the influx of work as the department moves to the central business district. And the other position is to help with data analysis in the Office of IT. So they'll do program duties and data requests for the various functions of SDAT. Exhibit 9 talks about the real property assessor vacancies that have been plaguing the department for quite some time. And there are, in the past, we have recommended that SDAT provide quarterly reports to MGA and DLS to talk about this vacancy issue. And you'll see, as of the last report that was submitted, that Anne Arundel, Prince George's, and Baltimore City currently have the highest number of assessor vacancies. Prince George's has the most at 8, and then Baltimore City at 7, and Anne Arundel at 6. I will say that the department has started to change their hiring process for these positions to try to get these qualified individuals into the work faster. And so 2 of the things that they most recently did, they hired a new recruiter for their HR division, and they changed the timeline for training. So previously, when you got hired, you would then wait until November to have a training in person to then start your job. Now, within 60 days of being hired, you are in an online training program. And it's my understanding that then you go out and you start doing physical work, and your site manager or your manager that's working with you keeps track of all of the things that you have succeeded at doing from your training. So it's more hands-on, and I think it gets these individuals into the work faster, hoping to prevent some of these vacancies down the line. And then just briefly, one more exhibit, Exhibit 10 on page 14. So Exhibit 10 talks about the homeowners and renters tax credit program utilization. And I just have one thing to point out here. So SDOT works with the comptroller to determine which homeowners may be eligible for the tax credit program, and then they contact them about their eligibility. And so from fiscal 2020 to fiscal 2021, the number of applicants to these tax credit programs increased, but there was a decline in eligibility across both the homeowners tax credit and the renters tax credit. So we've asked DLS to comment on why there was a decline in eligibility across the tax programs and submit a report explaining for the reason for these declines. And I just want to highlight one other recommended action that I don't think I pointed out earlier. So DLS recommends continuing that quarterly report on the real property valuation assessor vacancies. And so we've asked them to both provide the same information that they're providing before, and then discuss some of the new processes with this new hiring. So the amount of time that it takes for the average hire to finish this training and probationary period that they've instituted, and to get some more of this new data coming in. And then just to point out, there are two appendices. The first one is the updated JCRs from last year, just giving a brief overview of what the reports detailed. And Appendix 2 talks about that major IT program. And I will say before we finish, the reason for the increase in this fiscal year from last fiscal year for the IT project is because right now they are in the process of moving their data over to this new IT system. So it's going to cost a little bit more money, but there's more information here for you to read at your leisure. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm excited to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. She says she's excited to take questions. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? All right, well, I see none at this time, but thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now hear from Mr. Michael Higgs, who's the director of SDAT. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Michael Higgs, and I am the director of SDAT. And I am also happy to answer questions if you guys should have any. Thank you, Ms. Smith, for that wonderful recitation of the agency's budget. We also concur with the governor's budget allowance and all of the DLS recommendations made therein. Full report answers can be found in the testimony we submitted. Just a couple of brief things that I'd like to talk about before I turn it over to you guys for questions. I just wanted to mention that really emphasize that all of the assessment metrics in real property remain extremely strong, even with the hiring challenges that we've had. And you guys know what they are because I've talked about them in front of this committee for several years running now. It's tough when DC, Fairfax, and other places are poaching away our assessors at up to 50 cents more on the dollar than the state can pay. But we are still doing a great job on assessing those properties and getting tax bills sent out on time. This past year, we successfully reorganized and merged our charter business personal property assessments, and customer service contact center into a new business services unit, which makes it much more streamlined for all of our business-focused services. And our customer response time has been decreased from 8 minutes to less than 45 seconds for callers on most days. We've seen our online systems, the Maryland Business Express, has had numerous enhancements in online filing, making it easier than ever to conduct business with SDAT remotely. We have transitioned to telework. We went from our headquarters operations with no telework up to 70% telework today. And all this while still providing great services to a record number of Maryland businesses that are in good standing today, more than we've had at any time since Maryland was keeping track of this data. Our digitization projects are all moving forward quite well. Our quest for a paper-free environment continues. Every piece of mail that comes into the agency is being scanned on the front end and integrated into digital processes that we have for our workflows on the back end. So the more that we can do to encourage online filing and move away from paper filing, it's going to help us become even more efficient as we go forward. The tax sale ombudsman's office that was set up last year has helped thousands of homeowners avoid tax sales and help spread the great word about all the different programs that Maryland has to help homeowners stay in their homes if they're facing difficulties with tax liens and tax sales. In the coming year, we will have a new website launch with dozens more resources to help homeowners that are struggling with this type of situation. We talked a little bit about our tax credit system from our analysts report, and it has a new front end that launched last year, and that's very exciting for our customers. But really for us, we're excited about the new back end that's going to be in place by next year, helping to automate a lot of the processing and hopefully making it much quicker between an application and a grant of that application or our determination one way or the other. Much better for customer service, much better for the counties that rely on this information as well. And we're also fast tracking our MBIS code conversion to get off of the Annapolis data center and put our applications into the cloud. And that's a lot of what our IT budget is going toward on the major technology MITDP side. That was really it for my report. If you guys have any questions for me, I am more than happy to take them. And in case you ask any really difficult questions, I brought along our CFO, who's much smarter than me, Christina Trotta, and she'll be able to help us out.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the subcommittee members? Senator Rosapap.
Thank you. Nice to see you. I want to talk about telework. So just give me a little summary of the challenges of getting into telework for your operation and how it's working out and what your plans are for the future.
Sure, it's one of my favorite topics. In fact, I started down the path of moving SDAT towards telework prior to COVID. And we had actually placed a large order for laptops in January of 2020 to get ready for a telework pilot program. And then when COVID hit, we were more prepared for to switch to remote work than just about any agency in the government. And really the way I look at it is a way to increase government employee retention. It's becoming harder and harder to attract and retain good employees in the government, and we need to work on improving their quality of life. And if we have work that can be done at home just as effectively as it can in the office, then I say that we need to do that. The biggest hurdle from a managerial standpoint is really being able to track what the employees are doing. And if you have good metrics on what your employees are doing at home, then you can tell that they're being efficient and effective, and you can allow them to keep operating there. So coming up with ways to track their actual efficiency and to make sure that our customers weren't losing out on any of the excellent customer service that they've come to expect, we're really forefront in our work to transition to a telework model.
What can't you do with telework?
There are certain in-office things that are absolutely necessary. For instance, I talked about our digitization efforts where people are still mailing certain documents to the agency. Right. So those are paper mailing that need to be handled and put into a scanner. But beyond that type of work, there is very little that cannot be done remotely. So what we do is we rotate people into the offices. So that they don't have to commute in 5 days a week anymore for the most part. And the vast majority of our workers are working at home at least some part of the time.
Do you find much in the way of customer demand for people being in the office? Not that I'm sure everybody likes to visit a tax office at least once a year, but do you get much demand for people saying, I want to be in the office as opposed to talking to you on the phone or by email or whatever?
There are some, but by and large, these are business owners that we deal with for the vast majority of our customer interactions that were in person. They're with the commercial side of our business. So those people tend to be a little bit more sophisticated than the general populace and are more ready to take up online filing and Zoom meetings and we have gone out of our way to help people that needed individualized assistance.
How much pushback, you say do mostly for quality of life and employee retention, which I love and it makes less sense. How much pushback though do you get from employees who are like, I do not want to stay in my house all day, every day?
Nobody has to work from home. Everybody is welcome to come in the office every day if they want.
I see. So
And that's the beauty of it is that it's
I see.
optional for people.
and the numbers I think you said were 2/3. I mean, give me a sense.
70% for our headquarters operations. Now that involves our tax credits, our business services unit, our office of the director, and our IT departments.
Now, did that mean 70% of the time they're at home?
Yes,
or that means
70% of the
people are
time.
at home at least once a week?
There are a few employees, and like I mentioned, our scanning group and
Yeah, I
certain
understand.
employees that just need to be in the office every day. But all of the other employees are on a rotation schedule that are eligible to be and have the opportunity to work from home at least one, if not more days per week.
And how does that relate to your local offices?
So our local offices have been doing things on a little bit more of a catch as catch can basis. We didn't have a set policy because things are very different in Montgomery County and Prince George's versus out on the Eastern Shore in Addie's neck of the woods or out in Western Maryland. So we allowed our local offices to set their own rules, and the majority of them remained open in some capacity. We're not holding in-person appeal hearings this year. We're doing all of those virtually, and as we did last year. And I think that's actually working out very well. Also, we've got a lot of the kinks worked out last year, and that process is moving along very well so far early in this appeal season.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Higgs or his team? All right, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. Thank you, Ms. Smith, and thank you to the committee for your interesting questions. All right, colleagues, we're now going to turn to our final budget hearing for today, which is the DHS Office of Home Energy Programs. We have Samuel Quist, who's our analyst. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Just 1 second, I'll share the analysis on the screen. This is the DLS analysis of the Office of Home Energy Programs in the Department of Human Services. The chart on the first page shows the fiscal 23 allowance is a total of $195.9 million. This is about a $46 million decrease from the 22 working appropriation. And this decrease is primarily due to additional one-time federal stimulus funds that are allocated in fiscal 22, which are partially offset by some increased special funds in fiscal 23. Exhibit 1 on the next page, this gives a summary of the total applications for energy assistance benefits per year, as well as the total number of households receiving benefits for each of the 4 main energy assistance programs that are offered. As you can see, the total number of applications is increasing for one of the first years in recent fiscal years by about 9%. This corresponds to the utility termination moratorium that was in effect earlier on during the pandemic from about mid-March 2020 to November of 2020. Following the termination of this moratorium, there was additional demand for energy assistance as termination notices began to once again be mailed out. During the same time, the number of households receiving benefits in fiscal 21 increased for the 2 arrearage assistance programs. However, there was not an increase in the 2 bill pay assistance programs, which remained at similar levels to prior fiscal years. Moving on to the fiscal 22 data is shown in Exhibit 2 on the following page. This data is available through November 1st, so the first 4 months of fiscal 22. And compared to fiscal 21, you can see at the first section of this chart, the total number of applications are again declining compared to that increase in fiscal 21. At the same time, the number of households receiving benefits is also declining for 3 out of the 4 programs, while the EUSP Arrearage Assistance Program is seeing an increase of about 25%. Moving to the average benefit amount section of this chart, this is showing that at the same time as these changes in applications and the number of households receiving benefits, there's been an increase in the average monthly benefit for all 4 programs. This is due to a number of factors. The first is that the bill pay assistance programs are calculated based off of a number of items, one of which is the cost of energy. And as you're aware, the cost of energy has been increasing over the past year, and particularly this winter. Another factor is that the percent of bill paid, which is showed in this middle section of this chart, has increased for the electric programs. And lastly, there were some additional supplemental benefits announced by the governor in a press release earlier in January of this year. There was an announcement that the minimum benefits for the Maryland Energy Assistance Program for bill pay assistance would increase from $300 to $500, and the minimum benefit for the Electric Universal Services Bill Payment Assistance Program would increase from $150 to $300. Additionally, there was a supplemental benefit announced of approximately $83 per month per household for these benefits. These average benefit amounts per month shown in the 4th section down in this chart are some of the highest in program history. If you look at historical data for these 4 programs, they've rarely exceeded $600 a month in prior fiscal years for any one of these programs. As you can see, they're all above $700 at least, with the highest being the EUSP Arrearage Assistance is an average of about $950 per month. As a result of these increased benefit amounts, the bottom section of this chart is the total dollar amount of funds spent for energy assistance per fiscal year. And in fiscal 22, during the first 4 months, the total is about 40% higher than in fiscal 21, reflecting the increased federal stimulus money available, as well as the increased benefit amounts. The other item I'd like to highlight in Exhibit 3 related to a policy change. Chapter 638 and 639 of 2021 contained a number of different changes related to energy assistance benefits. The change that this chart illustrates is in households with an individual over age 60. A provision in that bill increased the income eligibility threshold from 175% to 200% of the federal poverty level for individuals age 67 and older. And as you can see in this chart, there was an increase in the participation rates for households with an individual in that age range. The analysis is asking the department to comment on additional data on the number of households that were impacted by this policy change. I'm going to move now to a discussion about federal stimulus funds in the budget. So there were a sizable amounts of federal stimulus funds in both fiscal 21 and 22. In fiscal 21, there was $19.4 million allocated from the Federal CARES Act as supplemental funding for the Maryland Energy Assistance Program. Additionally, during last year's session, in supplemental budget number 5 of the budget bill last year, there was a total of $20 million from the American Rescue Plan Act. This was divided between fiscal 21 and 22, appropriating $10 million each year. And related to this funding, a provision of Chapter 638, 639 mandated that any unspent amount of that funding from fiscal 21 should be included in the budget in fiscal 23. So there is a total of about $570,000 in federal funds that represents that unspent balance that's included in the budget this year as mandated. The fiscal 23 budget bill, this contains two proposed deficiency appropriations for FY22, and these allocate the remainder of the federal stimulus funds available. The first is $73.5 million. This is in supplemental funds from the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which provides the main source of typical annual federal funding for energy assistance benefits. This, the federal LIHEAP program, within that funding, there is about $40 million for supplemental benefits and the increased benefit amounts I was talking about previously, as well as funding for weatherization assistance within the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is a component of that that's annually funded through that program as well. But that program is receiving some additional supplemental funding as well. The second fiscal 22 deficiency appropriation is $14.1 million for the Low Income Water Assistance Program, which is a new program announced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in fiscal 22. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the analysis about how that is being implemented in Maryland. Lastly, in this section of the analysis, there's a brief discussion of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was recently passed. As one of the miscellaneous provisions of that bill, there was an additional supplemental funding amount for the LIHEAP program. This includes funding that's available each year between federal fiscal years 2022 and 26. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced in January that Maryland would be receiving an allocation of about $1.5 million. However, that funding has not been yet allocated in the state budget at this time. Turning to the fiscal 23 overview of agency spending, as you can see in this pie chart, the majority of the budget covers energy assistance benefits, about 93% of the overall allowance. And within that, there is $69 million for the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, which is about 35% of the overall budget. And then for the EUSP program, there's a total of $144 million. The funding for that program comes from a combination of special funds. So the 30.7 shown in the chart is from the ratepayer surcharge for electric bills from the Public Service Commission has implemented on electric bills. There's also a $400,000 amount from a PSC ordered settlement amount that's allocated in special funding for this purpose. And then the Strategic Energy Investment Fund portion, this is $82.8 million in total in fiscal 23. The remainder of the budget covers the personnel and administrative expenses for running these programs. Exhibit 7 illustrates the main changes in the budget. Again, the main items of decrease, the bottom 3 lines of this chart are corresponding to those federal stimulus funding in FY22. And the one main increase in the budget is an additional $50.9 million in special funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund in FY23. This is reflecting increased revenue available to that fund in fiscal 23. And that ties into the next chart, Exhibit 8, which illustrates the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative auction results, which are allocated by statute to the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. And the statutory distribution for those revenues is that 50% of those revenues is dedicated for the purpose of energy assistance, which is included in the budget of the Office of Home Energy Programs. And although most of this discussion will be covered in the Maryland Energy Administration, which is the administrator of the fund, this chart here shows there's been some sizable increases in revenue from this special fund in the past year. The average clearing price for these carbon dioxide allowances reached $13 in December 2021, and the total revenue for the state of Maryland was over 44 million, which were both the highest numbers achieved throughout the history of Maryland's participation in the program, which has led to that increase in allocation. Exhibit number 9 shows a breakdown of that particular sub-account within the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. So again, this is corresponding to that special fund allowance in the DHS OHEP budget. The fund balance in that sub-account for energy assistance increased from 44.7 million approximately at the end of 2021 to an estimated fund balance at the end of fiscal 2022 of 66.9 million. And as shown in this chart, even with the increased funding from that sub-account, there's about a $17.7 million fund balance estimated to remain at the end of fiscal 23. And however, due to the conservative method that the Maryland Energy Administration uses to project those future revenues, it's likely that that fund balance will be higher than that at the end of fiscal 23. Moving to the personnel data summary. So there are a total of 14 regular positions that work in this office. In the fiscal 23 allowance, this is an increase of 0.5 positions due to the conversion of an existing part-time position to a full-time position. And the vacancy rate there were 2 out of the 14 positions vacant as of the end of calendar 2021. I'm going to move now to the issues section of the analysis. The first issue is related to denial rates for energy assistance benefits and the reasons for denials. Exhibit 10 shows that the most common reason for denials listed so far during fiscal 2022 was due to incomplete information being included in an application. And that was a common reason shown in previous fiscal years for similar data that was requested from the department. Exhibit number 11 shows the percent denial rates per fiscal year in comparison. As you can see in this chart, the denial rates for all 4 programs in fiscal year 21 increased, with the denial rates for the 2 arrearage assistance programs showing the largest percent increase. During fiscal 2022, these rates for all 4 programs have declined. For the 2 bill pay assistance, the decline was rather significant, about 44%. And the denial rates for those programs are some of the lowest in recent fiscal years. However, in contrast, the denial rates for the 2 arrearage assistance programs still remain elevated from previous fiscal years. The other charts in this section of the analysis illustrate the processing times for energy assistance applications. Exhibit 12 is the average number of days per jurisdiction for processing an application. The columns on this chart show, the first column is the reporting period of July 1st through November 1st of fiscal year 2021. The middle column is full year data for fiscal 2021. And then the third column over is the data from July 1st to November 1st for fiscal 2022, which is the most recent of the data that's available. And this is showing that overall the statewide average was 30 days through the entirety of fiscal 2021, and through the first 4 months of fiscal 2022 is declined to a total of 22 days statewide. The largest increase in averages in this chart shown are in Allegheny County and the Southern Maryland region, which serves Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's County. And this is illustrated also in Exhibit 13, which is the percentage of applications processed in longer than 55 days. 55 days is given as an informal benchmark corresponding to the termination protection period while an application is pending. So again, these are the same reporting time periods listed in the columns of this chart. There were 14% of applications statewide processed beyond 55 days, which has declined to about 7% during the first 4 months of fiscal year 2022. Again, the largest percentages over 55 days were in Allegheny County and the Southern Maryland region, as well as in Howard County as well. Howard County had the largest percentage at 42% of applications processed over 55 days. And the analysis is asking DHS to comment on some of the factors behind the increase in processing times for those 3 particular jurisdictions. The other issue highlighted in the analysis, as mentioned previously, the low-income household water assistance program, which received federal funds for the implementation of that in Maryland. The department has submitted a grant implementation plan to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and has indicated that they've recently begun to accept applications for the program. The eligibility threshold for this program is set at 60% of the Maryland median income. And DHS has announced that for this program, other households who are currently receiving energy assistance benefits or other cash assistance benefits through DHS would be automatically deemed categorically eligible for these water assistance benefits. These water assistance benefits include both bill payment and arrearage assistance for wastewater and drinking water services. There's been some evidence that these water costs and water arrearages have been impacted negatively by the pandemic as well. So there's been increased demand for these benefits. Moving to the recommended actions section of the analysis, the first recommended action is committee narrative on energy assistance applications, processing times, and denial rates. This is similar to language that's been included in the budget in recent budget years, requesting committee narrative on this data. This narrative is asking similarly for the total number of applications received, data on application processing times, as well as data on denial rates and reasons for denial. The second piece of committee narrative recommended by DLS is a report on the implementation of categorical eligibility. In the updates section at the back of the analysis, there's a further discussion of this issue. There is a joint chairman's response report provided this fall, as requested last year in the budget bill, on the department's efforts for implementing categorical eligibility across all energy assistance benefits. And the department has indicated that they're taking steps on centralizing the administration of energy assistance within the local departments of social services to be under the same administration as other benefits offered by DHS. They're currently offered the current administration structure is through local administering agencies in each county or the jurisdictions that serve multiple counties, which are separate from the local departments of social services in each county. There's also efforts within the new MD Think IT system to centralize the data system, which is currently a separate data system, into the new eligibility and enrollment system as part of that IT project. So this report is asking for a status update on that later in the year, and where they're at with the establishment of that. The third recommended action is based on the low-income household water assistance program that we were discussing previously. This is focusing on asking for information on how the establishment of that program and operation is going through its initial stages, as well as asking for some additional detail on tracking how those federal stimulus funds were used and spent for that purpose. But that concludes the recommendations, and I will conclude the DLS presentation, and I can take any questions from the committee at this time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the subcommittee members? I don't see any at this time. So with that, we will turn to Secretary Padilla, the Honorable Secretary Padilla with the Department of Human Services, and I believe she's here with her team. Good afternoon, Madam Secretary.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Griffith and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the fiscal year 2023 budget allowance for the Department of Human Services, Office of Home Energy Programs. I have my team here with me today. Lauren Molyneux, Director of the Office of Home Energy Programs, and Stafford Chipongo, Chief Financial Officer. I do want to take the time to thank Samuel Twist, the DLS analyst, for his comprehensive and thoughtful analysis. It's a pleasure to work with, and we appreciate all his support. You have my written testimony, which I won't repeat here. But before I address the recommendations and issues in the analysis, I want to take the time to highlight some of our accomplishments. The Office of Home Energy Programs, or OHEP, provides critical benefits to thousands of households in Maryland. The budget includes $91 million of additional funding and a total of $392 million for the Energy Assistance Program to be spent across fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. This funding would allow OHEP to increase electrical bill assistance benefits by 100% and increase gas bill assistance by 66%. During fiscal year 2021, OHEP provided us benefits to more than 85,000 households with assistance in 4 areas: heating benefits, electrical bill assistance, electrical arrears retirement assistance, and gas arrears retirement assistance. The average benefit for these programs range from approximately $500 to more than $1,000. In addition to the regular funding, OHEP received more than $19 million from the CARES funding. This funding provided an average supplemental benefit of $747 to more than 25,700 households. We know that when people reach out to us, they are already in distress. Getting their benefits to them as quickly as possible is always a priority of the department. The average processing time statewide improved by 30% since 2015, with average processing times declining from 30 days on average in 2015 to 22 days in 2021. OHEP continues to focus on improving access for the most vulnerable populations and streamlining the process to ensure those eligible for the benefit can easily navigate the application process. In fiscal year 2021, the percentage of eligible households with applicants 60 years of age or older received benefits increased by 10%. And we saw a 10% increase in benefits going to households with a disabled member. Another form of targeted outreach is the Critical Medical Needs Program. This program provides training to navigators in hospitals, cancer centers, and similar facilities. These navigators work with recovering patients to ensure that they have energy assistance when they return from treatment. OHEP has already trained 383 navigators, and 56 more navigators are ready to be trained in the coming month. The Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, LIWAP, is a new federal funded assistance program targeting low-income households that have past due water bills. Benefits may range from $100 to $2,000 and are paid directly to the water utility company. That concludes my opening remarks. Now, with your permission, I will move directly to the recommended actions and issues in the analysis. Thank you. The DLS analysis contains 3 recommended actions. The department concurs with all the recommendations. Turning now from the recommended action to the 6 issues for discussion. In response to issue 1 regarding factors impacting the volume of applications and the department's outreach efforts, since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, Marylanders have benefited from a variety of pandemic-related special assistance programs. This increase in assistance seems to have contributed to decreases in applications. We expect an increase in applications by the end of fiscal year 2022 as the special assistance programs expire. We're working with our existing community partners, such as the SNAP outreach networks, to identify eligible households that may not be receiving energy assistance. In response to issue 2, regarding the number of additional households with an individual age 67 or older who have benefited from the increase in income eligibility, as of December 2021, there were 489 households with an individual age 67 or older that have benefited from the change to the income eligibility. In response to issue 3, regarding the impact on overall denial rates and denials for incomplete information that may have occurred as a result of the change in income eligibility, a comparison of denial rates from fiscal year 2021 to those during the first 5 months of fiscal year 2022 reflects a steady decline. We do believe that this is because of the policy change, which allows applicants additional time to submit documentation. We do expect that denial rates will continue to decrease. In response to issue 4, regarding any factors impacting the mid-year increases in denial rates, particularly for average assistance benefits, OHEP identified 4 main factors impacting the denial rates, and particularly denial rates for the electrical arrearage assistance. First, the customers are applying for arrearages before the 5 years have lapsed for their eligibility to renew. Second, households are applying earlier and not waiting to be in a state of emergency, which result not meeting the minimum benefit amount. Third, households were applying for every program listed on the application. And finally, households applying for gas arrearages when their house is not heated with gas. In response to issue 5, regarding the increase in application processing times that occurred in some jurisdictions, OHEP services in Howard County and Southern Maryland are provided through the local community action agencies and no and not the local Department of Social Services. The application processing times increase due to significant staffing turnover in both agencies. OHIP is working with both organizations to improve their timelessness. In response to HHS regarding the launch of the new low-income housing water assistance program, the new program began accepting applications on January 31st, 2022, and we expect to start delivering benefits by the end of March 2022. This concludes my testimony and response, and I will be happy to address any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? Having reviewed your presentation, and thank you for the detailed written responses, I just had one question. I wondered when Mr. Quist was sharing with us the improvements, I guess, or the progress being made by some jurisdictions in terms of their application processing time. I wonder, do the different counties share best practices in terms of successes, so that, because some jurisdictions move to a longer processing time and some move to a shorter. So I'm wondering, how do the departments from different counties communicate with one another and share best practices?
Thank you. That's a very good question. But I'm going to have my executive director, the home energy programs, to respond to that question, because she's very close to what they have done and how they communicate with each other.
Excellent.
Please.
Sure. Thank you, Secretary Padilla. Thank you, Chairman Griffith. So yes, we have a regular ongoing call with our local administrative agencies where we are sharing best practices, challenges that we're seeing, accomplishments that we're seeing, and trends to share with others in the event that they have not seen them in their local areas. And because these are statewide meetings, we're able to take best practices from our rural jurisdictions, our more urban jurisdictions, and share them across agencies in which they're more applicable to.
Thank you. And just kind of still along the same lines, I appreciated the information about the primary and secondary, moving on to the denials for assistance. It's helpful to see some of the reasons for denial. It just made me curious as to whether or not, when we put information out about programs, whether we might be able to add, target some message to those who are applying when they get information about the applications, because the common reasons that you cited with, people applying when they're not eligible or not completing their applications. I just wonder if we could be more helpful telling constituents, hey, if you've received funds in the past, whatever, you can't apply again. These are the pieces of information that you need in order to be eligible. I guess I just feel like for people to go through the process of applying and then, waiting through the process and then getting a denial, if there's some of that we might be able to take a more, address it more in advance versus them going through and then finding out.
Absolutely. Here, you can elaborate on the education piece that the community action agencies and the local DSS have put in place to do some of that.
Sure, and it is, thank you, Secretary Padilla. It is one of the things that we are working through in terms of ramping up our outreach efforts. We think about what is it like, no matter where the customer is, if they are at home or in an office, making sure that that application process is consistent and equitable, no matter where they're coming from. And in fact, it is one of the main focuses that we are going to be discussing during our work group, part of the low income utility assistance work group that kicked off in the fall. So we are always looking for improvements and hope to leverage that work group to solicit feedback from folks around the state.
Excellent. Thank you. I look forward to hearing more. in the coming months and year. My last question is, I guess maybe for your CFO, but probably for you, and it's simply just because I don't know. When you process the payments for the arrearages and, you know, it's going to the gas or utility companies, do the funds go directly to those companies? Because I think there are some nonprofits maybe assisting people. Do the funds go to the companies, or how does that work?
Actually, Lauren can answer that question.
Okay.
Thank you, Secretary Padilla. Yes, the funds go directly to the utility company or provider.
Okay. And then it's just applied to the account of the individual. And I think it must be working well, because we haven't heard from any utility companies that they've had hiccups with not getting those payments. So, all right.
And there's a lot of communication with the utility companies and as well to make sure that that is taking place.
Excellent.
And we take paying our bills providers seriously.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you all very much for your time. I don't see further questions for the subcommittee. You, Madam Secretary, have been very accessible, so I know if I have any questions, I can reach out to you or your team. So with that, we thank the analyst and thank you and your team. That concludes the hearing on DHS Office of Home Energy Program. And colleagues, it concludes our hearing for the day. We will be together again tomorrow. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon.